Copyright disclaimer on the Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowances made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use of use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Peace to everybody tuning in to the second episode of the first episode of the immune system. Second episode today. Like the show, share the show, tell a friend, and tell a friend. I am very much aware that people are not getting notifications. Yep. I sent the video out via inbox, but I know that the notifications didn't pop up at all. So whoever's in here, you know what I mean? Peace to you. What up, Joe Schmo? What's good with you? Those of you who will catch the replay, peace to you all. We're gonna get into a little bit of the immune system, but before we get going, in the source, in the description of the video, I actually have a source that I'm gonna be reading from, and I'm gonna put it on the screen. It's one of my books on immunology, and we're gonna go through the first 5 pages together, and it's just an introduction. It's not a lot, and then we'll listen to a little bit of a lecture by Brianne Barker, which is an immunologist, and she's also a part of the whole Twill Talk family with Vince Yellow and others, and we'll see what she's doing because she teaches immunology courses. So this will be good, and we'll learn a lot. But bear with me real quick because I'm, sharing the show and see if I can get people in the building and get things crack-a-lacking. Yeah, so guess I'll play a little bit of it before I really get. Nah, do I want to do that? Nah.
Your other bio.
All right. Let's see here. Yep. I know people ain't got their notifications. I'm aware of it. Intro, page 9. What you talking about? What book you talking about, Joe Schmo? No. Not of my book. Not of what SARS-CoV-2 taught me. The Immunology book. I'm about to put it on the screen for you. Yeah. I mean, we can go in my book and talk about the basics of the immune system, but let's get some expert stuff in here. Hold on a second. Yeah, I want to put this book on the screen. All right, so this is where we're going to begin. Let me zoom out about right there. That should be good for you right there. Let me know if that show up clear. All right, so all right, cool. Appreciate it. So this is a short history of immunology. Yeah. So the discipline of immunology grew out of the observation that individuals who had recovered from certain infectious diseases were thereafter protected from the disease. So I want everybody to pretty much understand that. First sentence. It says again, the discipline of immunology grew out of the observation that individuals who had recovered from certain infectious diseases were thereafter protected from the disease. Perhaps the earliest written reference to the phenomenon of immunity can be traced back to Thucydides, the greatest historian of the Peloponnesian War. In describing a plague in Athens, he wrote in 430 BC that only those who had recovered from the plague could nurse the sick because they would not contract the disease a second time. So the first recorded crude attempts to induce immunity deliberately were performed by the Chinese and the Turks in the 15th century. Various reports suggest that the dry crust derived from smallpox pustules were either inhaled into nostrils or inserted into small cuts in the skin, a technique called virilation. My bad. Now, in 1718, Lady Marie Wortley Montego, the wife of a British ambassador in Constantinople, observed the positive effects of virilation on the native population and had the technique applied to her own children. The technique was significantly improved by the English physician Edward Jenner in 1798. Intrigued at the fact that those milkmaids who had contracted cowpox, a mild disease, were subsequently immune to smallpox. Jenner reasoned that introducing fluid from a cowpox pustule into people might protect them from smallpox. To test this idea, he inoculated an 8-year-old boy with fluid from a cowpox pustule and later intentionally infected the child with smallpox. As predicted, the child did not develop smallpox. Jenner's technique of inoculating the cowpox to protect against smallpox spread quickly through Europe. What's missing here? Anybody know what's missing here? Before we even get to Jenner, before we go other places, there's something unique missing here. But it's in our book. So even though the immunology was born in the 18th century with the practice of virilation and Jenner's vaccination, it became a true science only in the 19th century. Beginning in 1880, the world witnessed a veritable torrent of progress, stimulated by both Pasteur and the students and by Robert Koch and his group. Those names are significant. 1880, 19th century, Robert Koch, Pasteur. The magnificent contribution was done by Pasteur, Roques, and Metchnikoff and Bordet on the one hand, and those of Koch, Pfeiffer, and Ehrlich on the other hand. Louis Pasteur showed with his work on chlora and anthrax and rabies, and these organisms, once intuinated, could be used specifically to protect the individual against the disease that they cause. From this extraordinary series of investigations were born the modern science of immunology. In 1885, Pasteur administered the first vaccine to a human, a young boy who had been bitten repeatedly by a rabies dog. And we'll take a look at the image in a second. Emil von Behring and Kitta Sato in 1890 inoculated toxins of diphtheria and tetanus to animals to produce neutralizing antioxidants serum. They introduced passive immunization in modern medicine, for which von Behring was awarded a Nobel Prize in 1901. Here's the image of the kid that Pasteur helped with, rabies. All right, and that's courtesy of the National Library of Medicine. So the phagocytic theory was first to be conceptualized in 1880 by a Russian zoologist named Elie Metchnikoff. He hypothesized that the basis of inflammation was the cellular reaction. Vascular and nervous reactions were secondary. He further suggested that the elimination of destruction of invaders was the sole function of phagocytic cells. Subsequently, many workers proposed the presence of uh, soluble substances or humoral factors, which were bactericidal. Finally, in 1903, you had Elmworth Wright and Stuart Douglas discovered the humoral component known as opsonine, which makes the target bacteria palatable for phagocytosis. In 1908, Metchnikoff and Ehrlich shared the Nobel Peace Prize for the respective studies of cellular and humoral factors in host defense. And Ehrlich proposed side chain theory of antibody formations and antibody function. In 1905, von Pirch and Schick published a brilliant series of studies on children treated with horse diphtheria and Aserium, which led to an untoward reaction. They then introduced the concept that all the events of immunological reactivity might not be beneficial to the host, and they named the disease caused by the immune response to horse protein serum sickness, a term still in use. In the same decade, Arthus, Proteer, and Richet described the continuous vasculitis and anaphylactics in animals. In 1913, Charles Rich received the Nobel Peace Prize in recognizing his works as anaphylactics. Pfeiffer discovered the phenomenon of in vivo cytolysis of Vibrio chlorea much earlier in 1894 and 1895 following intraoperational inoculation of V. chlorea and in immunized guinea pig. So peep this. The early experiment led to the understanding of complement medicated cytolysis by Pfeiffer and later Buckner and then Bordet. Jules Bordet was honored with the Nobel Prize in 1919 for his work on complement. Being successful in passive immunization against diphtheria and tetanus, von Behring applied his conception of tuberculosis and failed miserably. Robert Koch also had to accept the failure in providing immunity against tuberculosis. Ultimately, Albert Calmet and Camille Guérin, the French scientists, found out an effective vaccine, Bacille Calmette-Guérin (BCG), for tuberculosis in 1921. The vaccine had been prepared from the attenuated strain of Mycobacterium bovis. 20th century witnessed phenomenal advances in understanding immunological concepts. As the subjects grew, a number of diseases were assigned to immunological causes. All right, so that's the immunopathological disorders, and ultimately the subject was offered a separate status. The practice of transfusion of blood from man to man was risky and unpredictable until the discovery of blood groups by Carl Landsteiner. In recognition of his outstanding work of elucidating the blood groups and Rh factor, he was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1913. And now the concept of immunocomplexes and their important contribution to immunopathology came the development of radioactive tracers and immunofluorescent dyes. With these tracers and dyes, foreign proteins were tagged and followed after they were injected into the body, and their ultimate pathologic consequences were explored. It was impossible to understand the function of the cells and the immune response with the limited techniques available in the early part of the century. Lymphocytes were noted and their importance speculated, but these monotoneless, similar looking cells were difficult to study. The development of immunofluorescent techniques, Coons and his colleagues in 1942 allowed the localization of the unique products, the introduction of modern protein chemistry, and the use of cell culture techniques helped to a great extent in understanding the vast complexity of the defense system. Successions of theories were put forward from time to time to explain the specificity, memory, and other features of the immune response. Instructive theories such as direct template theory, which was Brill and Horwitz in 1930, Alexander 1931, Mudd in 1932, and indirect theories from Burnett and Fenner in 49, were the subject of criticism by Niels Jern and Burnett. Burnett's proposition of clonal selection theory, peep this, clonal selection theory was universally accepted as this theory shifted the immunological specificity to the cellular level. The clonal selection theory also explained tolerance as the deletion or suppression of entire clone of cells occurred before or soon after birth. Burnett was awarded a Nobel Prize in 1960, which shared with Peter Mendenhall. Most credit to Rodney R. Porter and Gerald M. Elderman in elucidating the structure of antibody. See, Elderman showed that the immunoglobulin molecule in the popular peptide chain, too heavy and too light, for their outstanding contributions, they were awarded Nobel Prizes. The existence of the markers in the biological individuality or histocompatibility of antigens was first suggested by Gore in 1937. Snell in 48 showed that the mouse H2 locus is genetically complex. The set identified the human leukocyte antigen, or what they call the HLA, locus of major histocompatibility complex. Beninkarev showed that genes of HLA determining loci may control immune response. That's key. In 1980, Snell, Doucet, and Baccarat were awarded Nobel Prizes, respective contributions in the field. Niels Jern was awarded a Nobel Prize in 84 for his contributions to immunology, the most fundamental of his role in developing the concept of clonality, and for his description of the idiotype network in the regulation of immune response. An ingenious method for large-scale production of monoclonal or monospecific antigen, or MAB, against any desired antigen was developed by George Koppler, Caesar Millstone, and Niels Jern in 1975. As you can see, the evolution for pretty much what we know today is monoclonal antibodies uh, started around this time in the mid to late 70s. Now, they produced a hybrid cell by fusing antibody forming itself with the myeloma cell. The production of MOB has a hydroma technique created a revolution in the field of immunology and opening up various researches, diagnostics, and therapeutic procedures. In recognition of their work, they were awarded a Nobel Prize in 1984. Another stalwart was honored by Nobel Award in 1987 for his study of genetics of antibody production. As you can see, this field of study was awarded a lot of Nobel Prizes. Murray and Thomas were awarded Nobel Prizes in 1990 for their work using immunosuppressive drugs in transplantation. Darty and Zinkelnagel were also honored with Nobel Prizes in 96 for their work role of MHC in antigen recognition T cells. In '02, Sidney Brenner, Robert H. Horvitz, and J.E. Sulston were awarded Nobel Prizes for genetic relations of organ development and cell death apoptosis. So here's a look at the list of people that we actually just named from table one who all won Nobel Prizes in the field of immunology. Can you have the source for that? What you mean, bro? Uh, if you look in the description of the book, you look in the description of the video, the source for what I'm reading right now is in there. It's a book. So here's your from 1901 to 2002. 100 years. All right, so As it had happened, it is expected that the world would witness further explosions of knowledge in immunology in coming decades. Concerted efforts are concerted efforts are needed to be directed in subjects such as tumor immunology, atomic immunity, and vaccinology to develop strategies for protection against many crippling diseases. Eventually, what has evolved as a precise and powerful tool created by nature to ensure continued survival of the species would perhaps be manipulated to yield better quality of life. So there's some study questions involved. It explains the contributions made to science of immunology over the centuries. I'm not going to do that today because a lot of y'all are probably just straggling in here, and we've already went through the first 5 pages of chapter 1, and we're actually done. However, there's some short notes about some people who made big contributions. However, there's a match the scientists with their contributions in the respective fields. So I need your participation, right, in this. What was Robert Koch's contribution to the field of immunology? What was his contribution? Can anybody say it? Was it genetics of antibody production, work on complement, cellular immunity, tuberculosis, radioimmune assay? Can you match any of these up? What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let you cheat. I'm gonna give you like 2 seconds. I need to get into something too. I want to go back over something too because I don't think I gave y'all this part right here. The immunology as a subject has grown immensely over 100 years. Really ain't got to get into that part, but we got the 100 years right here. So I gave you a little time to see that. Can you answer the questions right here? Can you match it up? What did Robert Koch provide, people? Everything says B. So what it if Robert Koch provided a radioimmune assay, which would be B, then what did Jules Bordet provide? What did Jules Bordet? We still got to deal with. If you said B on Rob, anybody else got a different answer? Everything said I was late. It's all good. You gotta pay attention. You know what I'm saying? You was late, but I read about Robert Koch, and then we came back to it. So I'm gonna help y'all out. Koch has everything to do with cellular immunity to tuberculosis. That was his contribution to the field of immunology. Immunology. Now, what about Bordet? What was Bordet's contribution? Anybody know what? Oh, y'all scared. Okay. Bordet, what was his contribution? If I gave you Koch and said his was cellular immunity tuberculosis. So that's off the board. So now we got Bordet. So there's only 3 other options. What would y'all say? What was Bordet's contribution? All right, it looked like I'm by myself. Okay. So I believe his was work on complement. Susumu Ton, 、 Tongawa What was his contribution? There's only two left. You got genetics and you got radioimmune assay. So I need somebody to assist me in that. If you had to guess, just throw a guess out there, man. Is it either genetics or is it radioimmune assay? Talking about we at work. All right, so Susumi has to do with genetics of antibody production. So the last one, Yalo, with his work would be on radioamine assay. All four of these people played a key role in the respective field or contributions to the field. So what I want to do here is I'm gonna actually I'm gonna get out of that and I'm gonna get y'all into this introduction.
So you all had a survey where you answered some questions for me about yourself. That's how I know things, like a lot of you are taking biochem and physics, but also about aspects of the immune system and immunology. And one of the things that you had to answer was you had to talk to somebody who was not a scientist, and you had to ask them about how the immune system worked to understand what was going on. So I have two basic things that we should talk about here. And the biggest thing I want to know is, how'd they do? Did you like their answers? Did you not like their answers? Did you feel like they knew what was going on? Did you feel like they were clueless? Like, how'd it go?
Yeah. Now, just to set the scene, this is Dr. Brianne Barker. She's an immunologist. So this is an expert in the field. This is a lecture from 2019, her lecture 1 introduction. However, I'm going to go through like different lectures that she does. She has like a 30 lecture course recorded, very similar to Vince Rack and Yellow, where she has done her live streams on the immune system, because that was something that both of them wanted to do. He taught virology, she taught the immunology. We just don't have nobody teaching I have an epidemiological course at an entry level online that I have found yet. However, she's significant in this, and I'm gonna play it and let y'all kind of understand it. But so she just told you that they had a task, and that task was, how does the immune system work?
Yeah, Lexi. Okay, so what types of things were they saying that made you slightly disturbed? Well, my mom's like, why are you asking me this? She kept me questions. Okay, I'm trying to remember exactly. Okay. All right. What else we got? Yep, Tony. Okay. A lot of people got a lot of information about antibodies. Yeah, Paula. So he compared it to a firewall. So that was okay. Okay. All right. What did you come up with, Lexi? My sister said something like, you have AIDS if you don't have antibodies. It was something really just okay. Okay. Yeah, Mark.
Someone told me that people get vaccines so that your body can fight off dead infections, so that they know how to fight off living infections.
Okay. So, yeah, Vanessa.
I had two people I really enjoyed. Also, the one person's also very much in political science. So I had those kind of people. They didn't have tons of background. They were saying that the body sends a bunch of antibodies to attack infections.
Okay. So would you say that they knew what was going on, or they didn't know what was going on? Okay. Yeah, Olivia.
Yeah, like a general idea, but not really like the detailed version of what actually happens.
Okay. If you were to compare how they would answer if you asked them about like how the kidneys worked or how the brain works, do you think they did better or worse?
I think it's the same in terms of how much they get right, but different in terms of like what aspects they get right, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, Tony.
When people like have more of a general understanding of it better than like or something, because like even in cartoons, I know that there's always that one episode where people shrink down. I don't know.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? Yes, Mark.
I feel like I don't know enough about the immune system.
Okay. So in some ways it's almost like I would say there may be 3 levels. Like the general public knowledge, the like science student before they've taken immunology knowledge, and the science student after. So you're at the middle. So I mentioned this because it actually is going to tell us a few important things about immunology. When people actually try to think historically about the first time somebody wrote about the immune system and the first recorded information of immunology, this is usually what they come up with. This is actually usually the quote they come to. You will notice that this is from Thucydides in the history of the Peloponnesian War in about 430 BC. You will also realize from that Thucydides did not have the prereq of Bio 250. Nor was there much sophisticated medical or molecular biologic information available at that time. However, Thucydides said, though many lay unburied, birds and beasts would not touch them or died after tasting them. The bodies of dying men lay one upon the other. But those who had recovered from the disease had now no fear for themselves, for the same man was never attacked twice, never at least fatally. There are similar writings in both Sanskrit and Chinese around the same time, but I can't read those. So we'll go with this one. And so people have been making observations about the immune system for a really long time. And even people without a lot of sophisticated science knowledge have a little bit of an idea about what's going on. As you saw, it might not have been perfect, but they have sort of this general idea. Whereas if you ask them about some other body systems, they'd be like, the who? And a big part of this is because we all have bodies and we all get sick and we all have immune systems. And so we have personal experience with a lot of these matters. This is going to become really critical for us. One other thing I forgot to mention in my introductory stuff. I post slides generally before I go to sleep the night before. I usually don't post slides before the first day. I post them afterwards because I kind of jump around and I don't know which ones I'm going to end up using. And so I'll post these slides after today, and from today on, I'll have posted the slides before. When people start to think about, well, okay, this is a nice observation, but what about experiments? When did people really start doing immunology experiments?
Let me help you out. Everything is everything. You have to think about what you're saying or what she's saying in general. As far as what we know now, they didn't know back then. They didn't know anything about the field of immunology back then, but they had an understanding that if you encountered a foreign pathogen and it did not take you out, that it wouldn't infect you twice. If you got infected by something once, it would not affect you twice. They didn't know about the immune system. And I know you came in late, so you pretty much didn't understand it. But what Brianne pretty much have on that slide is a general idea of what I read in the very first page of this book. Before it gets to talking about everything else, and then it advances into Jenner and the whole nine. Y'all, excuse me. So before, like this is what makes inoculations legit. Because you have the Chinese doing it, the Africans doing it, and all of this stuff. But nobody had a general idea. They didn't understand the immune system. But based on their worldview and their understanding of their natural world, they knew that something was plaguing people. And for when it plagued certain people, right, death would ensue. However, those who survived had some type of protection, but they didn't call that immunity. They didn't have a single cipher really what it was. Yeah, Dundada, that's Brianne Barker. This is her 30 lecture course on the immune system, which most people who even those of you who listen to 12 now didn't know that she actually had a 30 lecture. So yeah, at 430 BC, nah, they don't know nothing about no immune system. They don't know nothing about no immune system a long time ago. But their basic understanding of, or they really didn't even know what infectious diseases was. Remember, they called in the 1300s, they called stuff the Black Plague. That's in the 1300s. And they knew death would ensue. But look how Africans dealt with disease in that time. If you go back and you look at the history of it, they told stories about it. They made deities out of disease, right? They talked about these cases. So when these things plagued the the tribes, and when these people were plagued with it, people would pack up and move. Those who survived would move. They would move away from the location of where they were plagued at, or where this outbreak had occurred. Right? They made whole belief systems around it. Well, not belief systems per se, but a belief around it, and blamed it on something negative, right? Or spirits. If you want to use spirit as a translatable word for justifying how they saw things. But they didn't know. They knew whatever it was in this area, and it was taking people out. But what people call witch doctors and all of that, they began to understand, and I said this before as well, they began to understand that if they introduced from the dead bodies, if they introduced this foreign pathogen to their skin by making an incision and introducing that pus into their skin, they could walk around the community protected. They would never get infected. I've actually introduced that before on the Mossy Warrior Clan YouTube channel, discussing how that happened, because I was specifically speaking about northern Nigeria, where there was two tribes dealing with one particular deity at the time. It's kind of flipping my mind about the two, but I can come back to it, and I can name it. It ain't a thing. It's just so much on my brain right now. They just simply didn't know what it was. But these so-called witch doctors knew. So these people were scared of them and revered them because they were never infected. When the plague come, when the plague would hit and people would get sick. So they made these masks and they did these. They had these little ceremonies and they played these particular songs and narrated things in a particular way, and they stayed away from a particular area and all of that. But not those people who knew that it. You know what I'm saying? And then for people to gain protection, they would charge people to get some of that same protection that they had because people looked at them as they were bold. So they didn't have no level of level of understanding immunology at that point. There was never no course. So what we call immunology today, that didn't exist back then. So she would be accurate in her assessment to say what she said based on that. But she also said something else if you listen to her. And I'm gonna rewind it since we on this topic, because I don't give credence to nobody for anything.
You will notice that this is from Thucydides in the history of the Peloponnesian War in about 430 BC. You will also realize from that Thucydides did not have.
You can't say that there was humans more reactionary than anything, because everybody didn't know if you introduced the foreign pathogen to your healthy body that you would gain some type of protection. Everybody didn't know that. That was some of secrecy for a while.
The prereq of Bio 250.
But I think I was reading y'all the story of the Nupe and the Hausa. The Yoruba. The Yoruba. Man, I get it.
Nor was there much sophisticated medical or molecular biologic information available at that time.
See what she said? You gotta listen to it in this full thing, because she ain't gonna make a she gonna qualify it.
You will notice that this is from Thucydides in the history of the Peloponnesian War in about 430 BC. You will also realize from that Thucydides did not have the prereq of Bio 250. Nor was there much sophisticated medical or molecular biologic information available at that time. However, Thucydides said, though many lay unburied, birds and beasts would not touch them or died after tasting them. The bodies of dying men lay one upon the other. But those who had recovered from the disease had now no fear for themselves, for the same man was never attacked twice, never at least fatally. There are similar writings in both Sanskrit and Chinese around the same time, but I can't read those. So we'll go with this one. And so people have been making observations about the immune system for a really long time. And even people without a lot of sophisticated science knowledge have a little bit of an idea about what's going on. As you saw, it might not have been perfect, but they have sort of this general idea. Whereas if you ask them about some other body systems, they'd be like, the who? And a big part of this is because we all have bodies and we all get sick and we all have immune systems. And so we have personal experience with a lot of these matters. This is going to become really critical for us. One other thing I forgot to mention in my introductory stuff. I post slides generally before I go to sleep the night before. I usually don't post slides before the first day. I post them afterwards because I kind of jump around and I don't know which ones I'm going to end up using. And so I'll post these slides after today, and from today on, I'll have posted the slides before. When people start to think about, well, okay, this is a nice observation, but what about experiments? When did people really start doing immunology experiments? There's also a pretty clear answer to what that is. The first experiment that was ever done was by this guy, Edward Jenner. He did the experiment in 1796, and he published his paper on it in 1798. The story goes that Jenner observed
Right? So I'm gonna let her continue, but we should all understand what actually happened with Edward Jenner. I mean, I just read it to y'all again. He literally experimented on an 8-year-old boy by creating an incision and introducing the 8-year-old boy to cowpox, which he said would gain him protection against smallpox. That's what he did. And then he introduced smallpox to another kid. That kid was affected. The other kid wasn't. Let's go.
The lovely skin of the milkmaids realized that they were getting cow.
Now realize she's explaining the first immunological experiment to people. This is the first. They had no understanding of the immune system, even in the time of Jenner. They had an idea, right? They were having questions about how to protect themselves against certain things, but man, man. So here we go again.
Smallpox from working with cows, guessed that this might protect them from getting smallpox. And so he took some of the cowpox lesion from someone's arm and injected it into a boy and then injected him with smallpox. It was an 8-year-old boy named James Phipps. The second person he did this to was his own son. Obviously would not happen today, but showed that the child was protected. And so he was able to experimentally induce protection. We actually now know that there are multiple reasons why this story is false, but we'll go with it for now. And so this is an experiment that was done in 1796. It's pretty old. You don't tend to hear a lot about experiments that were done in those kinds of times in necessarily all of your different science classes. And you might say, okay, that's nice. That's a nice old-timey experiment she's telling us about. This protocol led to the eradication of smallpox. So this was a disease that people were terrified of. If you read old literature, you will hear about blah, 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 who in their pockmarked face. That was because it left anybody who lived through it with scars. So most people got it. A third of them died. The rest of them had scars all over. Just in the 20th century, it led to 300 million deaths. Led to deaths of all sorts of famous people. It was bad. If you read the details of how somebody dies of smallpox, it is gory. And this was a terrifying disease. And we got to the point where on December 9th, 1979, this disease was eradicated from the planet. And this is based on an experiment that was done in 1796. So these are legit experiments that actually had a really big impact. In fact, if we look at sort of all the ways that immunology has contributed, and we look at just vaccines, just the number of diseases that were, or cases of disease that were prevented using vaccines, we see massive changes in the number of these cases. So, for example, diphtheria went from 175,000 per year to 0 per year because of this vaccine, and on and on and on. So if you think about the number of lives saved, Team Immunology wins for most useful. But then when you start adding in things like amount of healthcare costs averted and amount of days of work people didn't miss and things like that, you can see a huge impact economically of this field. If you actually then start to add in agricultural vaccines and the things that we're able to do in terms of ag, immunology wins by far in terms of kind of contributions. And all of this is based on, in some cases, some pretty old stuff. If you look at the Nobel Prizes, this is a list of Nobel Prizes that goes only to 2016 that were awarded for discoveries in immunology. It is 20% of all Nobel Prizes in medicine. And so again, this is a field that is making a lot of really big strides. And it's something that people can kind of describe to you, at least a little. But there's another question that we might want to think about when we think about the immune system. Is it actually important to your life? Does it matter? And so one of the things I asked you guys was to tell me about some reasons why you might go to the doctor or things that could happen in your life that involve the immune system. So what types of things can you come up with that are ways that the immune system could be important in your life? Yeah, Mark. Okay. I will point out a couple of you guys used autoimmune diseases in like sketchy ways in answering your questions. You haven't had immunology yet, so like, who cares? But just FYI, some of you are gonna have to like twist your definition a little. Let's see what else we got. Yeah. Okay, so we've got details about organ transplant. And ways that we manipulate the immune system post-transplant, absolutely. What else? Yeah, Lexi. Okay, so we've got infection. Yep, Mark. Allergies. Yes, Ashley. Asthma. Let's see. Yeah, Nick. Chronic inflammation. Yeah, Tom. Anything else? Yeah. So any big infectious disease. Let's see. Yes, Paula. Yeah, largely because you want to get your travel vaccine. Yep. So cancer. Yeah, 20. Okay. Yeah, Mark. Rabies is either a vaccine or an infection. You kind of hope it's a vaccine and not an infection. So you can see that there are a lot of really important aspects of healthcare that you can see that are relating to vaccines or relating to immunology. In fact, you have named, usually what happens here is students name a whole bunch of like really specific infections and things, and then we classify them. And we're like, look, some of these are all autoimmune diseases, and some of these are all transplant issues. And you guys just named the categories instead of naming the specific things, so I don't have to tell you categories. Apparently, the thing I'm learning today is that both here and in my DSEM, people are answering like much higher than I'm expecting. So that's good. That bodes well for my semester.
By the way, I wanted to just kind of bring this to your attention again. Just for everything is everything, but the Yoruba and the Nupe fertility cult, the Ganu, they both got their smallpox deity. And if you remember me telling the story of the Ganu, you if you listen closely, I tell you about how stuff transpired. So it would correlate to what they knew, what they didn't know right then and there, and back up what I basically said.
So, but is it important? Okay, you think so? Yeah. So let me just give you a couple of reasons why it might be. So some people could be like, nah. I mean, like, it's about infectious disease, right? And infectious disease was, a big killer in the past, in 1900, but now most of our causes of death are really non-infectious disease. So who cares about immunology? In fact, it's funny because it's old-timey. And this poor Surgeon General, everyone quotes him and makes fun of. This is like this quote that people just use to make fun of. Where, the Surgeon General in 1967 is like, we've closed the book on infectious disease. We're done with that now. We're moving into the era of chronic disease entirely. This is the United States. If you looked all around the rest of the world, you'd see a lot more infectious disease. So if we care about the rest of the world, that's why it's important. But B, these are the top 10 leading causes of death worldwide. You can see that some of them are infectious. However, if we actually try to figure out which ones have some part with your immune system playing a role, specifically with inflammation and chronic inflammation playing a role, I can take credit for ischemic heart disease, stroke, COPD, lower resp infections, lung cancer, the cancers, HIV, diarrhea, diabetes, and hypertension. Someday I'm going to figure out how to get road traffic accidents too. But in fact, the vast majority of the causes of death worldwide all have one of these playing some sort of role. And so, in fact, this is pretty important. And you might say, well, okay, that's really great and all, but I don't care about that. I just want to make money. Just FYI, this is a very short list of antibodies that are now given in the clinic as drugs. And again, like I said, this is a short list of antibodies that people can use. And this is an old slide. This is 2019 or 2009 to 2014. These are all monoclonals. And you can see that, for example, in 2014, $62 billion of sales were on monoclonal antibody drugs. Most of some of these others, so the vaccines, and some therapeutic proteins as well are immune-based. And so if you think about what the pharma companies are doing, they're moving completely into immunologic-based drugs. And so that's another reason why a lot of this is really important. And so even if you decide you never want to care about this ever again, and you just want to, go make money or go treat patients, this is probably going to matter quite a bit to you. So, if you were going to tell me in like a sentence how the immune system works, what would you tell me? How does it work? How does this go? Yes, Tony. Okay, so your body has special systems to fight off foreign invaders. So I'm going to write that down because that's a good one. Okay, so do we like this definition? Do we think we need to make changes? Do we want to, anything you want me to tweak, or do you want to go with that? Yeah, Nick. Okay. Okay. So Nick wants to know, well, there's also something that goes on in terms of handling your own cells. So that should be a question toward our definition here. Yeah, Mark. Okay. What else we got? Yeah, Paula. Okay. Okay. Yep, Vanessa. Okay. Okay. Yep, Emily.
I know y'all can't hear the students. It's kind of hard to hear the students, but she writing down what they saying, and then she, if
Okay.
you ain't peeped it.
Yeah, Stephanie.
This course will. This why I said this is 2019, and this like really like before the pandemic. So the course will actually change, and we'll get to the 2021 versions
Okay.
of 2 through 30.
Yeah, Mark. So you can see that it may be a little hard to encompass everything in one sentence. Huh? A little bit. So you guys actually have hit on some of the points that I was going to be making. So that's good, and I will sort of skip through some of them. But there are other ones that I do want to point out to you. So if we just start with the idea of special systems to fight off foreign invaders, and we can compare that to, this is a textbook I used to use. This is the first sentence of the textbook. It says, immunology is a study of physiological mechanisms that humans and other animals use to defend their bodies from invasion by other organisms. Pretty similar. I have a couple questions for you. So first of all, neither of those definitions address where is the immune system. In the body.
Think about what she just said. She just asked him, "Where's the immune system?" That's a valid question. You can ask. You can ask anti-vaxxers that. Where's the immune system? Like we need to stop playing games with them when they're saying the things that they're actually saying, and then they're coming up with excuses. So just ask them. They're like, "I'm just gonna boost my immune system." Well, where is your immune system? Let's test them to see where they are. And then if they say, "What you mean? Where's your immune system? Where's your immune system located?" It's a perfect question to ask. Where is your immune system located?
Is it like an organ? So here it's special systems. Here it's physiological mechanisms. Is it an organ? Is it a cell? Is it a protein? Is it what? And so this is one thing to start thinking about. With a lot of, if you think about the nervous system, you tend to have some organs that you're thinking about with the ones. But when you start to think about the immune system, it's really decentralized. And so we're going to have to think about this at a lot of different levels. There are going to be times where we're talking about things at the level of proteins. There are going to be times when we're talking about the level of cells. There are going to be times when we're talking about this sort of at a level of more like anatomy. And we have to be able to switch between those levels because, in fact, the immune system is acting at all of those levels. Realistically, the immune system ought to act any place where you could get infected. And you can get infected at all the places. And so you kind of need to have some types of defenses happening in a lot of different places. So this definition mentions we want to stop invasion from other organisms. And Tony also mentioned that we want to get rid of foreign invaders. So in both cases, we see the use of the word invader, which makes my life a little complicated. In past years, these are a couple of other definitions students have come up with. So it's the responsibility of the immune system to differentiate between self and other. We're working against outside invaders. We're trying to act against foreign matter. So okay. So now I'm going to propose a problem to you on the next slide. And you need to tell me if the immune system cares about this problem or not. So remember, we're going to think about foreign stuff, foreign matter, protecting you against other organisms. Ready? Cows are other organisms. Wheat is another organism. Tomatoes are. Lettuce, I don't remember what's on that burger. All of those things are other organisms. So does your immune system protect you from these? So does your immune system do anything to any of those, to anything that you're seeing here? No. Maybe. But so realistically, you do not make a massive immune response to beef when you eat it. And so your immune system isn't just responding to any old organism that is not you. Because if it was, we couldn't eat. And as you can imagine, evolutionarily, that would be a pretty bad system. So we have to have all of these subtleties. We have to figure out things like resident microbes. We have to figure out a lot of different sort of small issues, because evolutionarily, having an immune system that just really looked at self versus non-self, which is the way sometimes people think about it, would never work. There's another way that evolutionarily this would be a big problem. This is the one that nobody ever thinks about. So, this fetus is half foreign. If you just put in a kidney from this woman's partner into her, she would reject that kidney. Yet, she can have a half foreign organism in her body for 9 months without her immune system rejecting it. You can also imagine that evolution-wise, if we evolved so that this was not allowed, that would not work so well for evolution. And so, in fact, the immunology of pregnancy immunology is its whole own field. It's related to transplant. And trying to think about how these types of things work. So it's not even, is there detection of a foreign organism, but or is it self versus non-self? In fact, having these types of subtleties becomes really important for the system to fully understand what's going on. Yeah. That's actually the funny thing, is that you guys happen to all use the word invader, which has like intent on it. And I'm like, that's a bigger argument for a whole other time. Because there are some immunologists that actually would tell you that that's part of it. But yeah, so whether or not these count as invaders, that is true. Invader makes my life a little tricky here. But they are certainly other organisms there are foreign matter or foreign organisms inside of you. And so you can see that this becomes really, really tricky really quickly. It's not just sort of this simple, we're going to learn about how our immune system detects the foreign things. Because it doesn't just detect foreign things, it's actually making some really subtle distinctions with different things that you might come across. So I want to go straight to this. So you're already here, but let me tell you some reasons why I think immunology is awesome. First of all, it's really vital to your health and your protection against pathogens. When this system malfunctions, you have some pretty severe illness, and it's a pretty fascinating subject. It's also a subject where we have this really long history, and so we know a lot of information. There's also a ton that we don't know. Almost every day in class, I will tell you something. I'm like, and that's the limit of our knowledge on that. Or there are certainly going to be times where you guys are going to ask how something works, and I'll be like, oh no, we haven't figured that out. No one's figured out how to do that experiment yet. And so we are going to actually see kind of science in action, because there is so much that's unknown. We're going to see some really, really critically important biological principles. Many of the techniques that use the immune system are important in other parts of biology. So again, if you never do immunology again, you're still probably going to come across this stuff with techniques. We've got lots of cool interconnected parts. It's going to integrate all the different types of biology you've taken in all your different bio classes. That's why I asked you about your other bio classes, so I can sort of pull on different information that everybody knows. But immunology is hard. I'm not trying to sugarcoat things. There are a couple things I want you to hopefully realize. It's a complicated subject. There's a lot that we don't know, and we're going to try to be pulling together information from different parts of biology. When you choose to teach an immunology class, one of the things you end up having to spend a bunch of time thinking about is the prereqs. I know some people who teach their undergrad immunology class with prereqs of genetics, molecular biology, cell biology, and biochem. And so because we're going to pull a lot of different information. I have done this here at Drew for a while. I know what types of courses you have. I only expect you to have 250, but know that you all are going to be bringing in different pieces of biology to our discussions. And so sometimes that can feel weird. It's okay. I'm expecting you to know 250, and that's it. But that's something that sometimes throws people off. The immune system is full of all these interconnected parts. So a real view of the immune system looks kind of like this. So now I want you to think about how you would take that image and put it on a syllabus that looks like this in a line. So we have this huge number of interconnected parts, and it's a huge challenge both for me in teaching this and for you in learning this. On Wednesday, I'm kind of going to do like a cast of characters. And it's going to be kind of like going through a bunch of different cell types and organs and telling you what they are. And to me, it's like one of the least interesting classes of the whole semester. But you need to know who some of the parts are so that when I zoom in on any particular cell type, and I tell you, well, it's turned on by this interaction with this other guy, you've at least heard of that other guy. And so you have to at least know who some of the players are. And then I'm going to be zooming in. But realize that we're trying to take a very interconnected system and smash it into a line. And it is really difficult. But there are other reasons why people sometimes mock the immunologists a little bit. We love our acronyms. Immunology has a level of acronyms that a lot of people find a little bit off-putting, and a level of weird nomenclature. Be aware of that right away. Be aware that at the beginning, sometimes it is going to feel like you are in a foreign language class. This is why I think it is very important for you to do the reading before class, because that way you will have encountered the terms before I say them. You won't necessarily have understood everything. You won't have put it all together, but you'll have some familiarity with all of those diverse terms before I say them. And that's one reason why I have been told by a lot of people that the videos really help, is so that you can go back and sort of pull things together. One of the other big reasons for this is that immunology is so old. There are things that were named in the 1700s or 1800s. And that name doesn't totally fit with things that we know now, but it just stuck. And so sometimes we're going to talk about the names of things, and you're going to be like, who? The what? And I'll be like, well, in 1940. And so as you're thinking about things, realize that that's going to be one of the big sort of issues here. We're going to get past it. But that's a thing that people sort of joke about, is why immunology is hard, is because of all the weird words. And so just be aware those words are coming and think about how you're studying to sort of deal with that type of thing. One thing I also sort of forgot to mention when I was talking about the history before, if you were a person who was interested in the human body and medicine in the 1800s, you wanted to study like parts of the human body in the lab, like live. Could you study human neurons? No, you are not going to get live brain cells, right? Could you do a lot of fancy work on the kidney? No. What could you do? Blood. You could pull blood out of your patient. And so blood cells have been characterized and described for a really long time and looked at under the microscope. And people know a lot about blood cells.
Hold on. Because she rambling right now to her students because she's trying to get them to understand why they should study immunology. I think we should all have a basic understanding of it. But we actually having a little side conversation in the chat while tuned in. And I want you to think about this. They didn't understand immunology. They didn't. They don't know nothing about the immune system or none of that. I mean, uh, to some degree, right? But they figured out how to survive or protect themselves against a foreign pathogen before modern medicine would ever come to an understanding of the immune system, virology, epidemiology, etc. Right? Meaning these people were already taking precautions in trying to aid and treat themselves against these things that they know, well, they didn't know existed. Someone all of a sudden, just out of the blue, they was healthy and then they became ill. They didn't understand that they have already been infected by something that they couldn't see or what viruses were or anything like that. There was no science there at the time. The body of knowledge that we know today in the field of virology, immunology, and epidemiology was not there. Yet you had Africans, you had Chinese and others, right? Develop some type of response to these plagues. Like, man, people are falling ill and they dying. Let me do something about it. And then you had these. That's why I keep saying "quote unquote" witch doctors going back, and then they're saying, "Okay, I can solve it, I can treat it, I can cure it, but you're gonna have to pay me to protect yourself against it." And then the more people that was paying to get this protection or for themselves, the more it became knowledgeable to others. And once it became knowledgeable to others, more people began to take on that identity of this is how we stop this thing that we can't see from plaguing people that occurs a couple of times a year or every time or during this particular season. But again, there was no scientific field. There was no studies, right? There was none of that stuff that we know today to actually prove that they were on the right track. It was guesswork. At best, it was guesswork. I said all of that to say that never mind, I ain't gonna say it. I ain't gonna say it. I'm just gonna be quiet. But yeah, Nusha, you was on a whole nother topic. He said, yeah. She said, I jumped all the way out the window. Yeah, you usually do jump out the window on certain topics. But yeah, we were referring to viruses. You know what I mean? But Africans would pack up and move. They would migrate to other locations because they would think that where they previously lived or inhabited was, plagued with evil spirits. They basically would call viruses evil spirits. Of course, they had no command that viruses don't care where you migrate to. They will follow depending on what they are, right? Like they didn't know. But Brianne's just pretty much going through right now because she's wrapping up. Well, I'm gonna let her say what she's gonna say, and then I'm gonna get into something else real quick, and then we'll wrap up this first little intro.
Before they knew anything about any other types of cells. And so again, the names for them are like wacky because someone named them in 18 whatever. again, this is more of something you need to be aware of going into learning this material. I will also tell you that it's something that I think a lot more immunologists should think about, because we do most of our work on the immune cells of the blood. There are tons of immune cells that live in the wall of your GI tract. We don't tend to take out people's GI tract, degrade the wall, pull the cells out, and see what they do. And so maybe we're actually getting something that's a little biased. And sometimes when we look at tissue responses, they're a little different than the blood responses, but we do blood because it's easy. So be aware of the nomenclature and the acronyms. We like the Greek alphabet a lot. I will put on Moodle actually a page with the Greek alphabet and how to type the letters, because they come up so often. I did not understand that being in a sorority was going to be helpful for being an immunologist, but I got my Greek letters down. Just because something has an alpha in it does not mean it's related to the other thing that has an alpha in it. It's just because we're not very creative. The other thing that's a little bit tricky is that sometimes immunology seems counterintuitive. It's not. But you have some ideas about how biology works, and maybe you have come up with some shortcuts in your head. Some of what you're going to learn is going to really challenge those shortcuts and make you really think through how basic biology works. That's why I mentioned some of us are going to redefine autoimmune disease. Okay, that's going to be just a general thing. Sometimes we're going to have to redefine how we understand how things work. There is one day of class that I will demo to you right now. I'm going to stand here and talk. And this process is random. One student. When you say random, you don't actually mean random, do you? Yes, I mean random. But it's not really random. Yes, actually it is. But, there's a process. It's not random. No, it's random. And we're going to go back and forth like that for a while. Because there are some places where, I had one student last year, who sat in the back, sat right where Sydney is sitting, who had dramatic facial expressions all the time. Whenever that student's mind was blown, I knew it. And there were definitely places where there was lots of mind blowing going on. So again, be aware of that, and be aware that sometimes that might be a little bit uncomfortable. To realize that, this is sort of challenging how I previously thought certain parts of biology works. And that's okay. And one of the reasons I love immunology is because it makes you really understand some of the other parts of biology well. But it just might feel a little painful from time to time. So I also want to remind you a couple of other things. So this is, to me, a sort of critical piece of how I think about the immune system. Some of this has to do with the types of experiments I care about in my lab, the types of experiments I've done in the past, but this is a big way that I think about this. And so realize that immunity emerges during evolution largely because of the challenge posed by infectious agents. And so sometimes something makes sense in terms of it evolved to protect you against infectious agents, and it doesn't make sense for any other reason. Sometime I was at this conference, and someone was talking about how much of a selective force microbes were compared to how much of a selective force saber-toothed tigers were. And it's a little bit of a silly comparison, but if we think about selective forces, microbes are much more of a selective force than it was, say, asthma or, say, diabetes in the past. And so, in fact, sometimes our immune system is set up in a way that works really well for the pathogens and really poorly for some other stuff. And that's okay, because it works so well for the pathogens. And the pathogens are such a big problem that if all of our children died when they were 1, then that would be bad. So our immune system works to save them all and has some bad side effects down the road. And evolution proceeds like a tinkerer during millions of years, slowly modifying products, retouching, cutting, lengthening, using all opportunities to transform and create. Different tinkerers with the same problem will reach different solutions. So the point here is, again, we're solving a hard problem with the tools of evolution. And so sometimes, again, you're going to be like, no, it could work this way. And the response is, well, how would you evolve something that works this way? You can't. Like, that magic wand, maybe sure. But like, no, this is how evolution answers this question. And so sometimes you'll see things that seem a little odd, and it's because, remember, we are looking at things that are happening as a result of infectious agents. Couple things I want to remind you about pathogens. If the whole point of this immune system is to evolve in response to pathogens, then we should probably have a couple things in mind about pathogens. Whether we are thinking of them like Sun Tzu or whether we are thinking about them like Green Bay. We need to know a little bit about that enemy. So please remember that we have a few different types of microbes that we're going to be thinking about here. We may be thinking about viruses, we may be thinking about bacteria, we may be thinking about fungi, and we may be thinking about parasites, which may be unicellular or multicellular, like worms and things like that. These are going to lead to infection. Infection is a situation where the microbe is established and growing. That has nothing to do with whether or not the host is harmed. It is just whether or not the microbes are inside you. So all of those microbes that are helping you digest things in your GI tract have infected you, but they are not causing disease. Those are all infections. Disease is only when we have damage to the host. And there often are multiple steps along the process of an infection leading to a disease. So just because you are exposed to a microbe does not mean that you are going to be infected. And just because you're infected does not mean you're going to get sick. In fact, one of the big determinants is whether or not there's an immune response that stops the microbe from colonizing or stops it from causing damage. And so you need to be aware that infection is the first step, but is not the whole part of the process. Ideally, your immune system may be stopping things before we get to the point of disease after that infection. So there are a few challenges that I just want to point out with microbes. And this one I want to do in a slightly different order than the slides are in here. Yes, Mark.
So if damage to the host is caused when the immune system is fighting off the infection, like by the immune system, does that still count as disease or is that still bad?
That is officially known as immunopathology, and people will debate that answers to your question. And so I call it immunopathology. All right, so if we think about some of those different microbes that I mentioned to you, viruses, bacteria, fungi, and different types of parasites, there are a couple things I want you to think about. First of all, we can think about replication rate. Last year, Dr. Dunaway decided he was going to sit in and audit this class. He came for the first day, and then he never came again. When I mentioned this point about replication rate, there was funniness that happened in the class at that particular moment. Because I asked, how long does it take for a bacterial cell to replicate? What's the generation time of a bacterial cell? And what's the generation time of a human cell? And he was appalled that everyone didn't have the answer like that. Just appalled. So what do we think in terms of generation time of a bacterial cell? How long does it take for a bacterial cell to replicate? How long does it take for one of your cells to replicate? For what? Bacteria or human? The fastest a human cell can replicate is once every 24 hours. And that is the fastest. Okay? What about bacteria? Yeah. So usually we think about something like the E. coli replication rate as being 20 minutes. So your cell can make another copy of itself once every 24 hours. E. coli cells can make another copy of themselves once every 20 minutes. So what that means is that if we try to think about, we put E. coli next to some of your cells and some nutrients, who's going to win in replication? E. coli, always. The microbes can always replicate you out of house and home. They always are going to win. And so some of the defenses that we're going to have are really dependent or are really based upon that, are really based upon just knocking down numbers. Because if we were to allow full-on replication, if we were to allow microbes to replicate at their full rate, we would never win. And so that's one of the reasons why things like non-specific defenses are really good, because they're just pushing numbers down until we can have a specific defense that can make a difference. And so that replication rate you want to think about is going to be really key. We can also think about things like, are the pathogens different from our cells? Somehow our cells have to recognize that is E. coli, this is skin, and be able to know the difference. And so there are big challenges in thinking about how we see responses to different pathogens based on how different they are from our cells. So if you were to think about different types of microbes, different types of microbial pathogens, which ones are sort of pretty similar to our cells? Any that might be a problem here? Yeah. Why would fungi be a problem? Yeah. So fungi are eukaryotes. So they're probably going to be a lot harder and going to probably require something different than, say, bacteria that are very different from us. Anything else that's a problem? Yeah. Yeast cells are fungi. Yeah. Okay, but yes, they would be a problem. Anything else? Yeah, Tony? Yeah, all of our eukaryotic parasites. So, malaria and Giardia and all those things are all eukaryotic. And so that's going to be really, really different than how we would deal with some type of bacteria. Viruses use host cell products. So again, we're going to start to have some challenges. And so thinking about, well, what actually is different about this? And how in the world could our immune system realize that this pathogen is different in order to make a response is going to be very key. Some pathogens mutate really fast. And so having a fixed target is going to be hard because there's so much variation. We also have to think about where microbes are found. So there are some microbes that are found outside of cells, some are in cytoplasm, and some are in cellular compartments. And so, in fact, we have to have immune responses that do surveillance in all three of those places. We have to have immune responses outside of cells. We have to have immune responses in cytoplasm. We have to have immune responses in compartments. And the other thing is we have to think about the size of the pathogen relative to the size of human cells. So a lot of times people think a lot about how their immune system works and they imagine Pac-Man. For those of you who are not children in the 80s, Pac-Man was this video game where there was this yellow guy and he ate stuff. Anyway, everything's about Pac-Man, right? Your cells just go and eat all the bad guys. So this is a parasitic worm called Ascaris. It came out of a person's GI tract. This is somebody's hands holding a big mass of it that came out of someone's GI tract. I tell you that so that you can think about the scale of those worms. Do you think you have a cell in your body that can eat that? No, not at all. And so what you can see is that phagocytosis clearly is not enough here. And you can realize that things like size actually will be part of what determines what kind of immune response we have to make against different microbes. Because some of them can be combated really easily because they're small, and others are going to take a whole different process because they are so giant. So the one last thing I just want to tell you about is that if you were to make a list of all the organisms that could be infected by pathogens, you get a pretty long list. And so if you were to think about all the organisms that can have defense, you get a pretty long list. We are largely going to be focusing on the vertebrate immune system. I'm not going to say a whole lot about immunology in plants or in invertebrates or things like that. I'm really going to be focused on vertebrates. So just to be aware of that. I mean, yeah, the other stuff's cool. I would love to talk about it, but no, not time for everything. So we're gonna do the cast of characters, the who's who, on Wednesday, and I will see you guys then.
So that was a 50-minute lecture, actually a fall class, Brianne Barker, right? So I ain't even subscribed to the channel, but I knew where to go get the video. If you know where she is, 12 all day. Look, she ended her fall lecture class with vaccines and cancer. So here's her full course of the class that she teaches. Now I played the 2019 intro because she doesn't have a 2021 intro. They didn't have class in 2020. Well, she did. She probably was in class, but I don't know. I think they did online and private. However, her and Vincent Racaniello both started doing things online. So I was like, let me just go to Brianne and pull up her immunology classes from this particular fall and then walk with her through that. Now, I brought out the intro, but in order for us to get to B cell, which is B and T cell stuff, which is up here, there's things that we have to understand at the ground level before we jump here. And then we get into the B, like I said, these B and T cell discussions in this body, all the way up and through here. And then there's something that Unc wanted to jump right into and talk about the NK cells, your natural killer cells, and how important they are in the fight, especially for vaccinated people and unvaccinated people. But there's some issues with the unvaccinated people tend to not understand fully about the NK cell fight. But he wants to go directly into an in-year course lecture, and people still don't understand the basics of everything else. Now, y'all can watch these videos on y'all own. I ain't about to replay all of these. But for those that are really, really, really interested in the fact, man, you can't come back to that to gain an understanding. I just don't want to talk over people's heads. And I'm trying to give y'all the most simplest way or explanation for these. Now, I'm going to play a little bit of this because I'm going to show you how the 2019 lecture is totally different. It's totally different from
If my troubleshooting this morning worked.
Look, these lectures are totally different in 2021 and 2019 because she's gave you the ability to go to timestamps. But she don't have the timestamps in the description. Hold on, let me subscribe. Let me refresh.
But if my
All right. Yeah, so she ain't got the timestamps in the description, but she do have it in chat. Look. There you go. She got it over here. Right? So we can go to different parts. We can skip like infection versus disease. I don't know why we want to do that, but we would. But this is the beginning of what we can discuss, because when I get into chapter 2 of my immunology book, which y'all, if I'm gonna be sharing this information or letting y'all walk with me through this information, then there's some things that you're gonna have to know. And this talks about the host microbe relationship and disease process. And in lecture 2 of her course, she's talking about disease and what? I mean, she's talking about the virus and the disease. So it begins with infection and immunity involve interaction between the host and the infected microorganisms. Based on the relationship of the host, microorganisms can be classified as saprophytes. Comes from the Greek word sapros, decayed and phyton, plant, and parasites. Saprophytes are free-living microbes that depend on dead and decaying organic matter. They are found in soil and water and play an important role in the degradation of organic materials. In nature, parasites are microbes that can establish themselves and multiply in hosts. All right, symbiosis is an association between two or more species, meaning living together. The term symbiosis include. You see what I'm saying? I go through all of that. So this walks us right in the direction of where we can follow up with Brianne's lecture. So it's like a double dose, which some of us don't actually have or get an opportunity to do. You see there? Chronic disease, latent infection, primary infection, secondary infection, reinfection, local infection. Like all of these things, these are intricate. And this basic level stuff. Methods of transmission of infection. Like these are the things that we had to look forward to, diagrams and such. Help us deal with all of that. Right? And then we come down and then there's some information at the backside. This chapter long, by the way. But then they got some essay questions and some stuff like that. So that's what we are. This is like 17 awesome. I just got an immunology textbook. Yeah, I know I'm here. I mean I know what her stuff was, but you remember that Vince had her doing immunology stuff, bills. They were just doing shows like 12 on his channel, but her actual classes, and that's why I asked you in the chat, but now I know my answer. You didn't know. But this is pretty much the thing. And like really, we really behind on, well, I wouldn't say we really behind on it, but some of us are really behind on it because we actually can go through and walk with that. I'm not going to waste people's time with me and what I be getting into. It's nerd life over here. But, this will be useful for Unc because he want to get into that immune system. He gonna get some jewels out of Brianne, but also out of he ain't got this textbook. This textbook, fire. There's some jewels in this textbook. That die line all the way. Look at that, chapter 3, immunity. And see, this is big because this is the core of the conversation. So innate. There you go. We get into that. You got innate and you got acquired. You got active, you got passive. Then you have boom, 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 boom. So we're going to get into it, man. You know what I'm saying? I could have just skipped and went directly to chapter 3 and we start building on that, but it makes no sense. I mean, I got it in a book to get directly here, but some people might not even follow. So, it is what it is. But let me get up out of here, man, for that. I don't need to be. Yeah, y'all don't want it. Yeah, ain't about this action. I just turned y'all on to something. Let's see how well y'all do with it. And I had this for y'all too, right here. This little piece of work.
This program is a presentation of UCTV.
I'm very excited to.
I know some people should remember this because I think I played this once before. This lecture right here by old boy
is to protect us from scary things that want to eat us. No, not these scary things. these scary things. So on the left, we have an electron micrograph of a virus particles. This is the virus that causes AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This is a bacterium here. That's the bacterium that causes tuberculosis. And over here, we have a red blood cell that's got some parasites inside. Those are the parasites that cause malaria. So those, of course, are the three big killers worldwide, infectious disease killers of people worldwide, along with influenza. We probably should include that to be the big four. And so we're going to hear something today about how the immune system protects us about these kinds of threats. Now, these are numbers from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control, the CDC, who keep track of this thing. This is the number.
Hold up, I ain't even gonna play this. She said it's all over the internet, right? That's what she said. She said it's all over the internet, and I ain't doing nothing special. I can't see her comments because I got a block. So I can't see her comments, and I got a block. And I ain't doing nothing special. Shout out to Garfield. That's why I say shout out to Garfield. Because Garfield went live in front of 1,700 people that he had on his platform, and he turned around and says my name and how I gave him a source to help refute some misconceptions the Hebrews had. So shout out to Garfield for that. He ain't had to say that. He just could have kept on in his little lecture with his sources and never mentioned anything that I've actually had said from the gate. But what I found is all over the internet. But people couldn't find it. My point in saying that is just because something is all over the internet doesn't necessarily mean people know where to go get it and find it. So you can hate all you want to. You're done here. So I don't know why you're here. She said, dude, who you telling to do their own research? He not doing anything special. She said, do your own research. It's all over the internet. He not doing nothing special. That wasn't dry hate, Chavez. Don't understand your question, Chavez. You asked the question, who and what is you talking about, Mika? The information is all over the internet. People just have to research. Yes, to those who are illiterate. Mika, you wasn't even doing your own research. She wasn't even doing her own type of research. What are you talking about? She didn't even want to get vaccinated, bro. It was mandated for her to get vaccinated. That's the only reason she got it. She had to wait on a mandate. Remember, she's still a Hebrew at heart. Now, whose job is it to interpret properly? Y'all went back and forth. Talking about we all looking for truth. No, you ain't. You looking to live your lie. What is you doing here? There's a lot of people that would disagree with that last comment that you made. That just won't say anything. There's tons of people that would disagree with that last statement. I don't know why she here, man. Go somewhere else. You bored? Go watch it. Oh, you arguing with that pseudo channel. We kick information over here. And some of the stuff that I actually kick, you ain't gonna be able to find. You ain't even spending no time of your day to go find any of these studies that we actually talk about. What journals are you reading? You're not reading a single journal. And you telling people to go do something that you ain't doing. You see what I'm saying? When you do it, then we'll believe it. But you don't do it. You don't read the journals because you still making the same simple mistake running around here talking about, but the vaccine don't stop infection. You still making simple mistakes that we've been discussed, been talked about, been educated beyond. It's not the infection that is a concern. These vaccines weren't. I don't even know why I got to keep saying that. These vaccines were never built to stop infection. That's a plus. That's a bonus. They were designed to prevent the spread of disease, hospitalizations, and death. That's it. If they stopped infection, which they've been known to do at a particular rate, they handle their business. But my whole thing is you don't know that unless you're studying. I'm confused. What you mean? Who is y'all? I actually learned a lot from y'all. Y'all give some info and we have to go research yourself. She 2000 and late. Right. There's many people, and this is no slighted G, but there's many people that'll look at his book and critique his book and say, well, I could have got this information somewhere else. You see what I'm saying? And then there's other people like me that appreciate the fact that he actually wrote a book, put a book together, and he sourced it up where I can go and pull more or extract more from the sources. See, those are the things, but you don't know that. You're into religion. That's where you stay at. You stuck. Learning about viruses and the immune system and how it operates, and and you in the healthcare field. But I don't know what kind of health. You might just wipe butts. But wholeheartedly speaking, it is what it is at that point. It's keeping it real. That is absolutely, you know what, and thank you for that. Nah, she don't be trying to learn nothing. I don't want to hear that. Don't be trying to hit the nice thing. And I've been told that I helped save some lives. How many lives have you saved, Meek? I bet you I saved more lives than you since you want to dry hate, which is what you good at. You keep your energy elsewhere, man. I don't be doing nothing. I don't even bring you up. You keep your energy there. You came over here on my channel being messy. So now that you're on my channel and trying to be messy, you get what's coming to you. But I appreciate everybody that actually got my book. I ain't sold no 1,000 copies. I wasn't looking to sell 1,000 copies, but there's a lot of people that actually got the book, and I'm proud of that. I think many more people should get it because we're talking about saving lives and we're talking about helping people. Like this is a tool that does those things and does them at a level that help advance this whole era that we're in. We're in the middle of a pandemic. And I would never believe that she's trying to learn. No, she's you know how parents have selective hearing. She's a selective learner. She's selective in what she's trying to learn. She's stuck at the religious phase. Still basic Hebrew, Kemet arguments. Atheism versus all the other stuff. She's into that realm. It is what it is. So if you want to come on my channel hating on me or talking to me, I don't even know what. Not talking to me because I can't see you. I have you blocked. So I can't see none of your comments. But the mere fact that you would come to my channel and try to be disrespectful is pretty bold. But man, on that note, I'm gonna let y'all go. We're gonna get into some more of the immune system. On a basic level, and then work our way up to what we're trying to get to have a better understanding. So by the time that the 22nd get here, we'll handle our business. Keisha, then the same old. You know how we sit here building, learning, going through lectures, going through the immunology text, gaining our information, and then we get this person that pops up toward the end and want to just type for 10 minutes to themselves for the last 18 minutes, hating. She ain't on Garfield channel telling people go do the research for yourselves. I ain't seen no one time go over there on Garfield channel and tell people all you got to do is go do the research for yourself about this, and this. Now, but you know what happened though? I don't even get into the Hebrew stuff, but I did research on some stuff that to substantiate these claims that was being made about West Africa and the Hebrews. I could have said, gee, you got to do your own research. Or I could have said, Eric, all of them, everybody else in the Dagger squad, you could go do your own research, but I ain't do that. And I'm pretty sure that's you with that troll page from earlier that said daggers are flying and pseudos are crying. I'm pretty sure that you would try to steal the Mossy Warrior clan spills are flying and pseudos are crying and make daggers are flying. That was lame. You know, bruh, listen, bro. It ain't no love. It ain't no love. Cause she said, yeah, exactly. Exactly. He ain't doing nothing special. I'm doing more than you. You in the healthcare field and I'm doing more than you. So what you mean I ain't doing nothing? What tools have you provided for the community to actually try to save lives in the middle of a global pandemic? What work have you put in? I'm curious. What your resume say, partner? You ain't did nothing. You ain't did nothing I'm doing. You ain't did nothing that I'm doing. So I'm going to ask you again. What kind of work have you done in the middle of a global pandemic to help save Black people lives or any lives for the matter? Not necessarily Black people. Don't shake your head, answer the question. Since you want to come on my channel and you want to hate, what have you done? You ain't on the front line of nothing, dude. You ain't on the front line of nothing. You ain't on the front line of nothing. Nothing. Talking about you at the front line. You ain't in the COVID fight. You on the floor registering people to come in the hospital. Yeah, you right. You're on the front line. You're in the front line. Can I get your ID and insurance card and can you sign here, and here for me? We appreciate you for checking people into the hospital and notifying the doctors and the nurses and letting them know the patient is here. We appreciate you for that. You're doing an awesome job. Got no dang on license up. They gave you a license to register people to come into the hospital. That's great. I don't know what you came here for, but I'll catch y'all on the Mossy.